Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. We are discussing mini grants, the letter of intent, and how to apply. So we did mini grants this month because the first cycle, or cycle one as we call it, opens on October 15th. And so cycle one, typically that deadline is in January, the January 15th deadline. So the letter of intent opens on October 15th. That deadline will be November 30th with the application deadline on the 15th. Projects for the first cycle may begin no earlier than February 1st, but we'll get more into the grant period as we go further in. For this grant, like our major grants, we require a 50-50 cost share. That just means that whatever you request of us, you have to contribute in kind or in cash on your part, and so that it matches or is at least 50-50. So if you're requesting the full $3,000 from the Arkansas Humanities Council, you will need to contribute at least $3,000 on your end, whether it be in kind or in cash. So there are several different types of projects you can do with the mini grant. The mini grant is just like the major grant, but in a smaller award amount. So all of the types of projects are the same, except there is the option to do a planning grant. That is the only difference in the types of projects between the two. So a little bit about each type of project. You can do a public program, which is pretty self-explanatory. It is an interaction between humanities scholars and audiences, whether it is a lecture, a discussion, workshop, or conference, to provide discussion, workshops, and so on and so forth. Then we have research projects, whether it is individual research or collaborative research. We offer publication grants on topics such as prehistory, history, culture, and or other scholarly works. We have changed our guidelines for publications. Usually it was just 4 traditional publications for a third party. For small museums and nonprofits, as is defined by our Museum Collections and Resource Grant, an organization may self-publish. If the organization is outside of that small nonprofit threshold, they will still need to go through a traditional publisher. And then we have documentary film. You can do that as a pre-production or post-production project. And the mini grant, all projects are awarded at a maximum of $3,000. The major grant would differentiate those into different award amounts. And then lastly, we have the other media, where I lumped in the planning grant as well. These could be could include but not limited to exhibits, whether it's in person or virtual, website content, historical signage or markers, podcasts, and so many other projects. If you have a project in mind but aren't sure exactly where it fits in with these broad categories, definitely feel free to reach out to any one of us on staff. We are more than happy to walk through your project with you. And that gets us into how to apply for a grant. The first step for applying for a mini grant is completing the letter of intent, or the LOI. This is just a form for us to be able to verify your organization and your project is in line with AHC guidelines. So in this first step, we require information regarding tax exemption. For our grants, we require an EIN, a letter of determination from the IRS, and the unique entity ID. Those are the 3 things we require to verify that tax status. And so the employment identification number is a 9-digit number assigned by the IRS. It should correlate with what is on your IRS determination letter. And then the UEI is a 12-digit combination of numbers and letters that lets us know that your organization is eligible to receive federal assistance funds. And so once you've submitted your documents, if we have an additional question, we will definitely reach out to you. If we require anything else, as far as your tax exemption, and then we have the project description and initial project budget. It will tell us more about your project that you're applying for funding for. The project description, you'll clearly and concisely let us know the parameters of your project, the activities that will take place, and should let us have an idea of the ways you would like to spend the funds you're requesting. And that should be reflective in the initial project budget, just outlining your project costs as they are estimated at the early stages of your project or at the early stages of applying for the grant, and being able to show us what your plans are for cost share. Once we get into the application, those will need to be a lot more specific, and you'll need to use our provided forms. But for this initial project budget, general estimates from an early stage is fine. We just need to know where you're pulling your numbers from. And so at the LOI stage, it lets us have an idea of what your project is and be able to provide feedback to you as an applicant, to help you build a stronger application. And so in the application, we're asking for a lot more specific information as far as the details of your project. And so, as I mentioned before, projects for this first cycle of the mini grant cannot start earlier than February 1st. And so cycle 1 runs from February 1 to January 31st of the following year. So you have an entire year to complete your project and expend all funds. And as long as your project takes place within that grant period or that cycle period, it is okay. And so you just need to let us know in your application what those dates are. We'll need a finance contact as the person to disperse your funds and to handle the money on your end. This person cannot be the project director that is handling the project and applying for the grant. And then we're also looking for the humanities content of your project and what areas of the humanities that you're covering and how this area is utilized or highlighted or being taught in your project. And to help do that, we have a checkbox for you to quickly check off which disciplines you will be highlighting in your project or utilizing in your project. And then we have a content section for you to be able to verbally write out what that humanities content of the project is. We additionally require one humanities scholar who has expertise in the field that you are doing this project for. This scholar must be someone other than your project director and who is not in the applicant organization, to provide like a third-party peer review of your project. That's not to say you can't have additional humanities scholars or someone within the organization to also serve as a humanities scholar. We just require that at least one be outside of your organization. And so after the humanities content, we get into a lot of questions of how did you plan your project? Where did this idea come from? What is your audience? Who is your audience? How will they be impacted? What are the project participants doing in your project? Who's evaluating how it's being evaluated? Do you have a publicity plan? And if you're doing projects like a documentary or oral histories, or something that requires interviewing, we do tend to require personnel information to make sure everyone who is working on your project has the expertise and the authority to be working on your project. And then transcripts for publications and those oral histories to fact check and make sure that the information that is being put out is reputable and academic in its scope. And so a little more about the humanities and the arts. In broad strokes, the humanities are academic disciplines that study aspects of human society and culture. These tend to include archaeology, art history, anthropology, ethics, folklore, history, law, and a number of other fields. The arts, however, tend to be more of theater, dance, music itself, and visual art forms, but the two work very well together and they're often entwined and build off of one another. And so we don't necessarily want to exclude the arts or they not be important, but the humanities is what we're looking for as far as what your project is at the heart of, or the humanities that are at the heart of your project. And so being able to pull in different arts and humanities is really a wonderful way to do that, as long as you're highlighting and focusing on those humanities aspects, like the traditional history, culture, language, and so on. And so back to the application portions. The last bits of the application are about the budget. We provide fillable PDF forms for you as the applicant to be able to numerically demonstrate funds requested and the cost share that has been secured. The top two sheets are essentially spreadsheets of those numbers and those figures that you've been able to pull together. The budget explanation is where you tell us where exactly those figures are coming from. This is an itemized explanation of the totals listed in the summary, as well as a justification as to why you're requesting those funds or why what you've chosen is the best or the strongest case for your project. The figures and justification should match each other across all forms and should be directly related to the project description that you've submitted. And so if you're ordering books for a workshop or a conference, those supplies and materials you would itemize as title of book by author at this price times however many you're ordering for a total amount. If you have a purchase order for that line item, you would attach that to the back side to the end of your budget. We use federal and state rates for most of our line items, such as mileage. We use the federal rate that is 65.5 cents currently. We use the United States Postal Service as their postage rates. Unless you have a vendor that you currently use, then you would supply their rate in its stead. If we, again, once you've submitted your application and we need additional information, we will reach out to you and we will ask for that information. And so a little more about what your funds can be used for. These are the line items that are listed in our budget. So those funds can be used for travel expenses, personnel costs, supplies and materials, printing and duplicating, equipment rental or purchase up to $1,000, and then postage and mailing. And so we go into a little more detail on our website about what funds can or cannot be used for. The one that gets a lot of people is that we cannot fund food or drink or per diem just generally as a part of your grant. That would have to come in as cost share or outside of the funds requested from AHC. And so this is just a snippet of common funds that are common and eligible expenses. We have a full list on our website under the grants tab. And then we've had some new grant guideline updates as of January of this year. Printing costs may not exceed 25% of the overall budget. This does tend to exclude the publication of that type of project, but if you're doing other types of projects, printing cannot be more than 25% of the entire project, not just what you're requesting from AHC. Then speaker fee or honoraria will be allowed at a maximum amount of $1,000 per speaker and grand total $5,000 per proposal. So you could hire, or you could bring in 5 speakers for $1,000 each, or you can make that smaller, but a grand total of $5,000 can be requested from AHC. Then, as was mentioned before, having a principal humanities scholar that is outside of the applicant organization, not to say that you cannot have additional scholars, but one must come from outside of your organization. And then publications where small nonprofit organizations may self-publish, while nonprofits that are outside of that scope must go through traditional means. And then this one will begin the 1st of 2024, in that an organization who has received 3 consecutive years of funding for the same project will not be allowed to apply for the same project for 2 more consecutive years, meaning they just need to take a break in between funding a specific project that they've repeatedly been funded for. And so this could include annual conferences, seminars, or workshops. But again, this doesn't take place until January 1, which would affect this upcoming mini grant cycle. So again, the cycle opens on October 15th. with the letter of intent, and that will run through November 30th, with the application deadline being January 15th, for a maximum of $3,000 for a broad categories of public programs, research, publications, and a number of other projects. And so here is our grants team. I'm over mini grants generally. If you have any other general questions, I will be the one that will be taking care of those. Katie Daly, she is our Chief Financial Officer. So anything that kind of has to do with the financial payments and the financial side of your grant, Katie will be the one that'll be reaching out to you on that. But you're more than welcome to reach out to any one of us on staff, and we would be more than happy to help you and answer any of your questions. And that concludes our informational part of the session. Again, we will be meeting the first Wednesday of November. We'll be talking all about reporting generally across grant type, and kind of walking through how that process works and the questions we ask and how to fill out your financial forms. We'll talk about proof of payment and all of those things. So come back next month if you have any kind of reporting questions. And we have recorded tonight's session, so you can refer back to it on our YouTube channel in the future. But thank you all again for taking the time to attend this webinar, and I hope you all have a good evening.